Before we get started, just a really quick introduction. My name is Jolika. I am the CEO and founder of Mentra. It was inspired by my experience as the little sister of an autistic, non-speaking individual. And our team today is fully neurodiverse, working across the country with a goal of matching neurodivergence with meaningful career opportunities and really enabling minds and hearts to thrive. We actually have started a campaign. This is the first webinar series in the campaign, and it's called Neurodiversifying the Workforce of the Future, where we'll be bringing in changemakers, advocates in the community every month to speak about important, headway that we're making in the community, research that's happening, groundbreaking, new insights about the field of neurodiversity as a whole. This webinar in particular is called Unmasking in the Workplace, where you will hear directly from neurodivergent self-advocates and 3 global changemakers here today and learn about the challenges faced from a firsthand perspective of navigating, a new workplace with autism and how to express oneself and one's authentic, neurodiversity. And with that, I will pass it over to Shay, who's going to be our moderator at today's webinar. Go for it, Shay Belsky.
Thank you, Jolika, for the introduction. So, introduction about myself. I am Mentra's Autistic CTO. I've been with Mentra for about 2 years now, and I'm really excited to be here alongside other autistic advocates, self-advocates who are all in the workforce, who have all had some journey about unmasking and being their authentic and genuine selves. So, with that being said, what is unmasking? There are still countless neurodiverse folks out there who are expected to sort of conform to societal norms and suppress their emotions or their genuine selves. It leads to masking or the social behavior of artificially performing or acting in a way that seems to be more normal or typical. And it can also be referred to as camouflaging. Quoting one of our panelists, M. Aspinall, we shouldn't need to hide our authentic selves behind a mask. And really transitioning into who our panelists are, I would love it if y'all can introduce yourselves and talk about where you currently are right now and what's your connection to neurodiversity and your passions about it. Let's start off with Nadia.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Nadia, I'm based in London at the moment. I'm software engineer by day, also founder of a mental wellness platform called Neuro. I found out I was autistic 3 years ago and started, I guess, my self-advocacy journey around I think I just kind of started taking it seriously maybe about 2-3 months ago. But in terms of when I actually felt I was autistic, it's probably as early as I can remember, I think maybe 10, 11 when I understood what the word meant. So I think I've always known that I was neurodivergent, but only recently I actually fully started using the label I am autistic and saying that myself.
Thank you, Nadia. Em, do you want to come in next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Em. I'm really excited to be here with everyone today. I'm autistic. I'm a community manager in the games industry. But in my spare time, I've been using LinkedIn to share my experiences, learnings, and passions as an autistic person in the hopes that they resonate with other people, neurodivergent or otherwise. I would really like to see autistic voices leading conversations on autism so that we can offer a bit of a new perspective on what it actually means to be autistic and show how diverse the autistic community actually is. So yeah, really excited to be here.
Thank you, Em. And Rochelle.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Mentra, for organising this. My name is Rochelle, and I'm from Melbourne, Australia. I'm a national account manager at Adecco, and I've been leading teams of recruiters and projects, including within the community services and healthcare sector. I have a psychology degree and currently doing my MBA. I'm autistic and ADHD. I was late diagnosed in the last couple of years in my 30s. And I'm passionate about many things such as animals, social issues, especially ethics and sustainability in the world of work. That includes diversity and inclusion. I also enjoy nature, film, human sciences such as psychology and nutrition.
Awesome. Thank you to our panelists for their introduction. And really, diving into who y'all are and your journeys, I'd love to talk a little bit about your journey with unmasking and how your unmasking journey has led to where you are today. Em, do you want to give it a start?
I'm never one to be like, oh yeah, I'll do it, but if I'm called upon, absolutely. So I think I started learning to mask at a very young age. I would say getting a diagnosis in the first place, understanding that I was autistic in the first place, it didn't even occur to me until I was in my early 20s. And even then, like going through the process of talking to anybody about it, any professionals about it, I just was met with barrier after barrier. But it was, in terms of like unmasking, it was very difficult because I'd learned these survival techniques, especially at work. And I didn't know anything about autism either. So I would say high school is when the mask really went on, because pressure to conform kind of kicks in when you're in high school. I gravitated towards people that seemed like me, had the same interests as me, so offloading special interests and, you know, talking at great length about things I was interested in. No one really cottoned on that it had anything to do with autism because we were all just a bunch of nerds, which was nice. But at university, I think the mask started slipping, partly because the pressure of university ended up being too much, and then partly because I actually found I was more comfortable being myself around people that have become my friends, that are still my best friends today. And also it became apparent later on that we're actually all neurodiverse, and we ended up gravitating towards each other because we all had that in common, or at least in part because we had that in common. So when it came to being at work, and I was in a job when I found out I was autistic, I had a fairly uncomfortable experience that I think set me back a little bit in unmasking, which was wasn't with my line manager, it wasn't with my boss, it was with someone who'd come into the workplace, and I was doing a favor for them. I was doing a little bit of a video recording for them, and they changed my schedule. And everyone that I worked with on a daily basis knew, don't change any schedule. Em doesn't like it. I get a little bit flustered. I don't communicate very well. I can like shut down. I need to go into another room to cool off. Anyway, this person didn't know that. And it happened just after I'd had an appointment where it was like, yeah, you're probably autistic. Anyway, so I said, you know, I'm really struggling with this right now. And I tried to be as eloquent as possible. I tried to explain what was going on because I was getting really frustrated and stuck. And I said to him, you know, I'm on a bit of an individual learning, you know, journey right now. I've just found out I'm autistic. I really struggle with changes to my routine, and this is a big change to my routine. You're asking me to go somewhere entirely new to film this thing that we'd planned to film in this office. You're going to have to give me a minute. And her response to that was, you're autistic? Huh, but you don't seem weird. And I didn't know what to say to that, because that was the first time I told anybody that I wasn't close to. But on top of that, the terrifying part was that this individual was here doing this filming with me because she was here supporting NEET students, so other students that might have been autistic or ADHD or have other access needs. And to hear someone who was in that position, who had that responsibility, talking about me as an autistic person, like I was, but I don't fit because I don't seem weird, I seem normal, sort of broke down my confidence in talking to a lot of people about it, because I was worried about getting that same response and not, as I say, I didn't know how to respond. I was worried I was going to be rude. Yeah, so I was set back a little bit in that regard, but the only reason I think that I'm as confident disclosing stuff about myself as I am today, and talking to people about me being autistic and going into work as an autistic person, not just as this not quite me version of myself that I used to be, is because other people that I was seeing on the internet were sharing all these stories that resonated with me. A lot of people having very similar experiences where they were questioned on whether they were autistic or not. They didn't look autistic or they didn't sound autistic. And it made me realize just how diverse the community of autistic people are, how if you've met one of us, you've only met one of us. So I thought, well, I'll add my voice to that in whatever way I can. And here I am.
I wanted to touch on a couple of things you mentioned, the relating to other folks who are neurodiverse. I've also sort of myself felt that I unintentionally or sometimes intentionally gravitate towards other neurodiverse folks as well. So definitely in the same way there. And also I can really understand your story about wanting to work with your employer in a way that was respectful and eloquent, and then also not being met with that same level of respect and decorum. That must have been a really frustrating experience for you. Nadia, do you want to talk about us next?
Sure. So my unmasking journey, I guess for me was quite complicated because I actually first was very aware not of masking as an autistic person, but masking as a Black person or a Black woman in a world where most people around me were not Black. And so I was very, very aware that I was walking into situations, particularly like school and places with friends, and hiding parts of who I am to conform and fit in with everyone. However, within that, I was very much unaware that I also was masking as an autistic person. So now I have these two versions of not two versions of myself, but two parts of who I am that are very much hidden away. And it was exhausting trying to figure out, what do I say? How do I act? Which part is going to upset? I guess the people won't understand the culture of where I come from, and which part is it going to be because they're neurotypical and they're not going to understand like the autistic traits of me. And unpicking that and figuring out how I could display just me as like Nadia within these spaces. I think that started happening possibly within the last year or two, when I started realizing that I'm actually okay with being who I am, and I'm not really going to allow anyone who doesn't understand or feel like I have to conform into whatever this like system or ideology they have about who I should be. I just stopped caring about it because it became exhausting having to try to comply with that. So yeah, I definitely think it was about a year or so. However, through that kind of finding the confidence to be, I'm just going to be who I am. I'm going to walk in as like the autistic Black woman that I am, and everyone's just going to have to deal with that. I walked into a situation with an employer where I wasn't masking at all. I was my authentic self, and it did not work for them at all. That the autistic traits, which were out there, the parts of my culture which I no longer wanted to hide, they really didn't like it at all. And I felt myself going back into those same sort of survival like tactics that I'd learned when I was a child. And it felt exhausting. And I started like realizing I was burning out again just by trying to figure out what I wanted to say, figure out what I wanted to do. And I ultimately left that job. I ultimately had to, because I realized that I can only be in places where I can feel that I'm accepted. I'm no longer okay with being in places with people that don't allow me to be who I am. And I think that is a constant conversation I have to have with myself. Like the unmasking journey doesn't stop from that one particular moment where I'm like, yeah, I feel confident and like it's done. I've unmasked and it's over. It's constant balance of making sure that I check in with myself and say, am I who I want them to meet, who they need me to be, or am I who I want to be? And so, yeah, I guess that's where I am today, just always checking in with myself to make sure that I am trying to be the authentic version of myself for myself and not for anyone else.
I appreciate that level of staying true to yourself and being true to who you know you are, and doing it for yourself and not for other people's sake. And I really appreciate your level of commitment to that for yourself. Rochelle, do you want to take us away?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess also, as I've mentioned earlier, being late diagnosed, I didn't know so much that I was masking for pretty much my entire life. And so I've spent, I guess, a lot of that time just wondering more so what was wrong with me. And I guess if I look back at the past and where that unmasking habits sort of started, I can quite remember it as, or at least I think so, when I was pre-primary school age and I was watching like a soap opera, some sort of soap opera on TV, and I was watching it and I was thinking, oh, is this real or pretend? And I can remember asking my grandma, is this real or pretend? Because it was just so convincing almost. It almost seemed in some ways just like anyone else throughout the day. And she said, oh no, it's pretend. And I said, oh, okay, maybe that's what everyone's doing. It's just pretending, because I'm not feeling it. Like, I'm not feeling these real interactions and experiences and the ways that people are communicating coming naturally to me. So I just sort of learned to become a little actor, I suppose, growing up, and relying a lot on TV shows and movies on how to behave. And as I, as Emily also mentioned earlier, as a teenager, the pressure just became more real, and I had to put on, a lot more of that mask in order to try and fit in. And as I continued to mask throughout, university and then into more the workplace, I just couldn't do it anymore. And I think that started, I mean, obviously throughout primary school and all that as well, there were a lot of meltdowns and breakdowns and things where I was just told, you're just so sensitive. But as I got into high school, I remember coming home and just crying and couldn't even say why. There was no particular thing that happened. I just remember these thoughts going through my head thinking, I can't do this again tomorrow, and again tomorrow, and again tomorrow, and over and for the rest of my life. And I don't know what it was, but I just knew I couldn't do all of this again. And then working in the workplace, I started realizing also I can't seem to really connect with people, and I wasn't interested in the things they were talking about, and I've often come across as rude and all these things, and I was always trying to figure out how can I be better, and it never seemed to work. And I had like what I would like to call a meltdown that just never, or a breakdown or withdrawal, combination of different things that just never ended. It just continued. I just kept breaking down. And that led me to getting, my diagnosis essentially for both ADHD and autism, and everything finally made sense. And that's when my unmasking journey started, because I had to now learn, okay, who am I really, and who have I been this whole time, and how can I, work through this? And yeah, the education started learning more about, different, we're all different, the diversity within, autism, and also, yeah, you don't look autistic, or you don't seem autistic, or anything like that. And so yeah, I decided to take it to LinkedIn, told everyone, I thought I'd just do it for myself. This was a test for myself, and I just took it to LinkedIn, and I told everyone on LinkedIn, this is, what autism and ADHD looks like. And it, by my surprise, it took off, and a lot of people resonated. And ever since then, I've decided, this is the way to go. And as Nadia also said, it is something that I have to check in with myself all the time, constantly check in. Is this really me, or is this masking? So it's a never-ending journey. And I know every single person masks to a certain degree in the world, where every single person has a mask, but healthy levels, where us, who are neurodiverse, we tend to mask a lot more to an unhealthy level, where, we just end up with other mental health issues as well, and so many other challenges. And I guess that's also what happened with me. So yeah, for me, it's still a journey every day, still learning to unmask. It's still very new to me. In the last year or two, But yeah, constantly checking in on myself and making sure I'm being my authentic, true self as well.
I don't think unmasking ever really stops. It's just a matter of understanding, discovering new parts about yourself. And it's a journey. It's like you find something about yourself like, oh, I didn't know that about myself. What do I do with this information? How does it make sense in my reality, in my life? And I also experience that every day. I'll discover something new about myself and be like, oh, this makes sense. Now, what am I doing with this? Am I going to tweak something about my life, do something differently? I really appreciated your story and the amount of time and thought you've put into this. Speaking of that amount of time and thought, thinking about how, when you're aware of the things that you need to be successful and how they make context for your job or where you work, how would you describe to your employers, to your bosses, that you were autistic? And how did you request any accommodations if necessary? And I'm going to pass it off to Rochelle first to answer.
Yes, I guess for me, it was a little bit, in some regards, a little bit backwards. Before I was fully aware that I was autistic and ADHD, I already knew my challenges. I just didn't know where they necessarily came from. And so when I was looking for work, I made it very clear that I need to work from home. And the pandemic helped that a lot, because a lot of workplaces now have, moved to finding ways to work from home. So I was like, this is my opportunity to finally be able to do this. So I really had these main demands, and that included, that flexible sort of hours and autonomy to be able to be trusted to just get my job done, and being able to work from home and having part-time hours, because I have so many interests as well as someone who's ADHD. I need to stay stimulated, and it can be hard to just stick to one thing constantly all week. So I demanded from the beginning that, I need these two things. These are the two major things, along with, wanting to do something I'm at least minimally passionate about. And that was my basis for me personally. And then by the time, I guess, for me, I felt like it was important. By the time I got my diagnosis and I was already working for a few months, it was important for me to suss out the organization and find out, what are they doing in the space of diversity and inclusion? What are they doing in the space of, autistic people or ADHD or LGBTQI or anything I was relating to? Is this, essentially investigating and researching the organization I was already working in, and whether I would feel safe to be able to have that conversation with them or not. And I think there's privilege that comes with that. There's culture that we have to consider. There's many different aspects. So it's not easy for everyone to just unmask openly. It's not possible all of the time. So we have to consider that. And I really put a lot of thought into that, because I didn't want to lose my job, of course, and didn't want to be discriminated against. And as I did that research, I also came across someone else who had ADHD and is open about being ADHD. And I had a chat with them. They seemed very lovely. We got along really well, and they said they were that support person for me, to go to and ask questions. And they encouraged me to eventually go to my manager and talk to them about it. And the response was quite funny, because when I went and said to my work, my team and my manager, oh, I have something important I'd like to tell you. It's really important to me. I've autistic and ADHD. They were all like, oh, so you're gonna resign? And I was like, no, they're like, that's fine, it's all good. And my manager just said, look, let's have a chat and see how we can accommodate you. So I got so lucky there. Not a lot of people have this, where they're open to having this conversation. So I guess I started with that work from home, those expectations of working autonomously. But there's many things, I guess, depending on the person, that you can look at from a practical perspective, such as ensuring that when you do go into work, that you have that chat with your manager about, quiet spaces, that there is a quiet space within the workplace for people who need those quiet spaces, and low lighting, and headsets, or noise cancelling headsets, or that people, that you are in an environment where you can bring any fidget or any kind of sensory items that you need to bring, you know, that you have the option of having online or one-on-one meetings when there's no need for group meetings. And if there are group meetings, that you have the option to put your hand up, that people know that they should be putting their hand up so everyone has a chance to talk. And also people like me who sometimes don't know when to stop talking and knows, okay, it's time to wrap it up, someone else needs to talk, you know, or knowing when to start talking as well, you know. Just asking for little accommodations like that, you know, seeking clarification, the opportunity for it, you know, making your manager aware that, hey, there's going to be times after meetings that we have, or whatever it might be, or, you know, if you've sent me an email, well, I might need clarification. So things such as, you know, verbal or written responses, having a conversation with your manager about whether, you know, or your team, that, you know, you prefer verbal or written responses to things, or maybe you prefer both. Sometimes I like to have that verbal conversation, clarification, and I like it to be written down for further to check on later, you know. I also like personally to have that list, a list of contacts. Who are those? The list of contacts, their areas, their contact details, their, you know, what is their role, what is the connection. I need a list of contacts from the beginning to know exactly who I'm going to be talking to. Having an agenda before meetings and sticking to that agenda. And if there's a need for, you know, going off the agenda, you know, give that opportunity at the end, maybe, where people can have a more free conversation about something that might not be on the agenda. But sticking to it is quite important to me as well. Communications about changes, you know, giving a heads up, giving some notice about if there is changes coming. And also one thing I think for me that's very important is telling my manager that, okay, if there's some difficulty around me accepting or understanding having to do a task where I need to do a certain task or participate in something, give me logical reasons, give me good reasons as to why I should be there, or, you know, why this is important by then, to get it done by then, or whatever it might be. But I need logical reasons. I need good explanations for why certain things need to be done in order for me to be able to understand it well, that clear communication, and those good reasons as to why we're doing it, especially if it's something that I can't quite grasp and understand, like, why are we doing this? Is a waste of my time. I'd rather just do what I was already doing, kind of thing. There's so many different things that we can do to have those conversations. It really is a matter of, I guess, just self-reflection and figuring out what works for us and what doesn't. And if you're in that safe space to be able to have that conversation with your team, your manager, you know, definitely try and do that. But I understand it's not always the case, and it's a bit of a tough world out there, as we know. So, but yeah, I will also be interested in hearing what other people have done, you know, in terms of those accommodations. But when things do become overwhelmed and stressful, what I do is I go for a walk. My manager knows I have that autonomy. I can just go for a walk whenever I want to. I don't have to ask or tell them. You know, I can, you know, lie down and take a nap, or I can jump on my Oculus Quest headset and, you know, do things I need to do just to get into a different world. And, you know, so yeah, I'd love to hear also from other people about what they do. And
it was a really interesting story that you described with respect to just having that conversation with your manager and them being scared of something, but they were really willing to work with you and give you what you needed to be successful. That was a great story. And Nadia, I'd love to know if you have anything you wanted to add to that, if you have a different experience, a similar experience, or what your journey with that has looked like.
Sure. So I actually have, I think, maybe 2 or 3 different experiences of telling an employer that I'm autistic. So the first time I had done that was very recently after I was diagnosed. I think I'd maybe been diagnosed for about a month, when you have that feeling like you should tell everyone. So I told my employer that, yeah, I was autistic, and I kind of said, I think I need that like a desk in the corner where I'm kind of like hidden away from everyone, where it could be quiet, I could put my headphones on. They were just very accepting of me just trying to figure it out, because I wasn't really able to say, I need like this whole list of accommodations. Are you able to do it? I didn't really know what I needed. So they were just okay with going on that journey with me, like finding that desk that I needed, adding an extra monitor if I needed to. I had puzzles beside my desk for my team. We had like lots of things around our little area that kind of made me feel comfortable, and they were very accepting, and it made me feel really supported. I mean, now the things I need, I think I'm better at voicing exactly what that is, but it was so great to have an employer that was like, we're good with you just being here and we'll help you figure it out. So if you need to go home for a bit, go home. If you want to sit there and do a puzzle with your team for like 5 minutes, if that's how you guys de-stress, then like go ahead and do it. And so, yeah, that felt really great for me. And then when I transitioned out of that role into another one, I had an experience where I told my employer very soon after, I think I got an offer to start working there. And I was like, just to let you know, I'm autistic. So I would prefer to work remotely, just because that allows me to manage my day. And just like Rochelle saying, like, I want to go on a walk and not have to explain, like, I'm too tired. Do you mind if I go outside? I just wanted to be able to own that part of my day a little bit more. And their response was, don't worry, we won't treat you any differently. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's so great that they said that. But I never expected them to treat me any differently because I was autistic. I expected to be treated equally. I was more telling them in case of when I'm asking you to, like, I want to work remotely, it's not just because I thought it would be a cool idea. It's because it's something that I needed. And so I became very, I guess, aware that there's a difference between awareness of someone's issue and inclusivity, and like inclusion, because someone is neurodivergent or has a mental health diagnosis or possibly needs accommodations that maybe the majority like doesn't have. And then I guess here's the third one. So the third one I had as well is I went into an employment space at a new role, and it's the very first time I've seen a workforce which has been designed to be inclusive. So I actually didn't have to ask for a single accommodation because they already had everything set up. And I very much think that that's a place where I hope a lot more like employers get into. I think the accommodations that we need are actually great for everyone. To have an agenda in meetings, everyone needs that, to be honest. No one wants to go off and we start talking about random things. No one wants that. To have that structure, to have clear communication, to be able to say, I might need a quiet desk in the corner of the office because of X, Y, and Z, whether you're neurodivergent or some other reason. There should be room in all workplaces that allow for this. We should be inclusive of the fact that everyone is different but should be treated equally. And so I would love that no one has to go to work and have to sit there and say, by the way, I need these 10 or 20 things or whatever that is. It's incredibly difficult to own that conversation with your manager. It's incredibly difficult to have something that you need them to help you with and advocate for yourself at the same time. It takes quite a lot of confidence to be able to do that. And I've been in a place where I haven't always been able to do that for myself. And therefore, I've constantly burnt out because the workplace wasn't designed for me. So I think when it goes about asking for accommodations, I would love to flip that question and say, how do we go about designing workplaces to be more inclusive for everyone?
First off, I caught on to the puzzles before, and I miss office puzzles. Before the pandemic, we had a puzzle at our desk, and I wonder what happened to that after we all went home. What was the puzzle that y'all were, if you were working on a puzzle with your peers, what was that puzzle all about?
We had a puzzle that we probably would do like every month or so. So we got like 1,000 like piece puzzles, and
wow.
It would always sit by my desk. And whenever it's a bunch of like developers, whenever we got stuck on a problem or we needed to talk about something, we literally just go around the puzzle and do it about, like, I don't know, a couple times a day after lunch. And then we would hand it over to another team and the puzzles would just circulate around the office. So whatever there was available, really.
That's so much fun. And a great way to get developer attention too. And you really mentioned something about not being treated differently because of your autism, and that you should never feel like you have to be treated differently by your employer or by somebody else because of that. And that is a great sort of transition into my next question about times that you may have been cast aside for being autistic, but those opportunities for also remaining resolute and true to your authentic self. And I want to turn that over to Em to tackle if there were times that you felt that you were cast aside for being autistic. And if there were those times, what made you sort of stay true to yourself?
I've never been cast aside for a job. In the process of being hired, I've never disclosed being autistic until after I've secured the job. I don't think I should have to. I think that they're hiring me on my merits. They're hiring me on what I'm good at, and I feel fairly confident that the jobs I've gone for I've deserved, and I've worked for them and I've earned them. So I feel like being autistic is secondary to that. But when it comes to actually being in positions at work where me being autistic makes things a little bit more tricky, or people having that like communication barrier sometimes making things more tricky, it's usually when you're in the role that those problems occur. So I would say an example of this was my attention to detail is immense. I see little in design as a really good example. If something is even slightly misaligned, say you've got two blocks next to each other and one is maybe 2 pixels, 3 pixels under the other one, I notice it and it eats away at me. It makes me have these, I call them knee-jerk reactions, and I've had to sort of try and manage that a little bit better because people were hearing me get angry about stuff that made no sense to them to be angry about, but I can't stand those imperfections visually. And that actually did lead to a few conflicts in the workplace, to be sure. And yeah, I'm still tackling that one. I think it's very much a meet in the middle. Especially in the place where I work now, we've been talking about, you know, what can we learn from this attention to detail that I bring to the team, rather than seeing it as this frustration, this obstacle of, oh, Em's never happy with the design stuff that we're doing, and Em's always bouncing work back because this thing isn't pixel perfect. What can we put some time into? What can we invest in to make it so that we're not making these tiny mistakes? Because ultimately we want to be the best we can be. So we were talking about introducing like templates and cheat sheets and just general processes that would make it easier to avoid those really little niggly things that don't annoy people as much as they seem to annoy me. But yeah, I think that's one example of many examples where me being a little bit precious about things, me being a perfectionist, and not necessarily knowing how to communicate when there's something wrong in a diplomatic way. I think ultimately that's what it comes down to. It's how do I point out this issue without hurting somebody's feelings, without being too blunt. And that's still a learning process for me. I've not fully mastered that. But I think, again, meeting in the middle, like people not expecting me to go, hey, here's 2 positives and a negative, which is a formula I do stick to sometimes. People like 2 compliments, and then you come in with the, but this could be better. When I forget to do that, at least the people that I work with tend to recognize that it's not me being rude, it's not me like devaluing the work that they've put in. It's just me being helpful, because ultimately I just want us to put out the best we can. Yeah.
You've got the compliment sandwich, and I can very much relate to doing that as well. You've got 2 good things and one maybe not so good thing. I totally get that. I want to do a speed round question for all of y'all, and you've got 45 seconds each to answer this one. And what advice would you give to our neurotypical allies? And this one is going to be, you've got like 45 seconds to answer each of these questions. And we're going to start it off with Rochelle, and then Nadia, and then Em. So Rochelle, what advice do you have for our neurotypical allies in 45 seconds or less?
I would probably say don't take things personally. When we say something, we say it specifically, well, at least in my experience, about the specific issue. There's never a hidden underlying secret message about how we feel about you as a person. So in my experience, whenever I've been told, oh, you know, you're so blunt or direct, or or whatever, it's sort of like, well, I've never said anything horrible about you. I'm just saying that that television is this and this and this. You know, it's nothing to do with you as a person. It's literally what I say is literally what I'm saying and what I mean. So don't take things personally. Just focus on exactly the words that I'm using. There's no hidden meanings behind what I'm saying.
An analogy I've used there is onions. Like when I'm telling you something, there's no layers. It's not an onion. It is what it is. And it's what's on the label. It's what's on the box. Nadia, what advice do you have?
I think one advice I'd have is that when we approach conversations with each other, like I am as different to you as you are to me, and remember that so that we don't judge each other. We are on equal footing, and I think that's important to make sure that conversations could be collaborative, inclusive. And another thing I would also think about is when we talk about conversations, that tone and what I'm saying is there's balance, I guess, in both. But really listen to the words that we're saying. Tone is a huge is a big thing for some people, and we don't necessarily communicate or to have tones in the same way. So listen to the meaning of my words and don't just judge everything by the tone that you hear. So don't assume the meaning of what I'm saying.
Totally get that. And tone is a huge deal for me as well, because sometimes I can be flat, sometimes it's up and down. I totally get that as well. Em, do you want to round us off with some advice?
Yeah. Don't expect us to know what we need in the moment that we need it. So when we're struggling, when we're having a little bit of a burnout or a meltdown, or we can't put the words together to explain what's going on, and we're feeling overwhelmed, in situations where you're panicking and you're struggling, no one expects you to go, well, I need this, go off and do this. But I think because we're autistic and because we're expected to have these support plans in action of the way that we deal with things, because we deal with it so often, like we might not have the answer to what we need in the moment, and it takes time for us to process what's even going on, to figure out what the triggers are. If there's like some sensory overload happening that we've been ignoring, we've been putting out of our minds, that has become too much. It will take time for us to identify that, and the worst thing you could possibly do is go, oh, it's fine, oh, it's okay, tell me what you need, I'm here to help, and overloading us even more with that social interaction only, at least for me, makes it worse, not better. And I feel extra pressure to help you help me, when really what I should be focusing on is just helping myself.
I love that. And I love all of the advice that all the panelists gave. Thank you for that advice and for all of your stories. I want to turn it over to some audience Q&A. And I want to thank the audience for their engagement, for chiming in on different things, and for asking a lot of amazing questions. We've got our first question from Megan, who asks, for anyone who wants to answer this, any of our panelists, when you first started to unmask, how did you identify which traits were part of the mask? As someone who was newly diagnosed with autism, I am sure I am masking, but not sure how. Anyone want to take that one?
I think it's sort of a trial and error. You sort of identify the things that are making you tired, and it takes a long time. It's not like, oh, okay, so I know I'm autistic now. I should be able to just figure out what to switch off and I'll feel better. And it's not that at all, because you've spent your entire life practicing these learned behaviors and pleasing other people and being a yes person. And I don't think it's a conscious thing. I think it's subconscious on many levels. And it is just a case of very slowly but surely unpicking every single behavior and analyzing everything and trying to figure out, is this causing me harm? Is this making me tired? I think I might be unusual in this, but I started documenting that kind of stuff because it was so much to like try and keep in my head at all times. I started thinking about behaviors around my parents particularly, or at work, writing down things that frustrated me, and then looking back on an average day, what was happening that was just getting overwhelming, and go, right, okay, so what was my reaction to this? How did I respond to that? Yeah, it's so time consuming, but I think it definitely helps quality of life, for want of a better way of saying it, like knowing yourself that in that level of detail. It's not going to come quick, but it'll be a worthwhile long-term investment.
It's interesting how you said about like documenting it and like really taking a catalog. And you mentioned that, and also Rochelle talked about like acting and like having almost a level of drama is the literal word here, but it applies in the sense of doing what people expect you to, as if you would on a stage or playing Dungeons and Dragons. So I can very much understand how taxing that can be mentally too. I totally get that. We have a question from Rosa. How did you go about figuring out what accommodations you may need? Nadia, do you want to take this question?
Sure. So work-wise, I started figuring out what accommodations I needed, mostly by reading about what other people were already asking for. I really wasn't sure. I knew, I think Rochelle said this earlier, that I knew what wasn't right, but I didn't necessarily know how I needed to go about fixing it. And there's a lot of pressure when you're trying to fix your own problems. So just speaking to other people, and Instagram has also been a great source if you see sort of like posts about accommodations and other things. That was really helpful for me. And so I took pieces of some of that information and I kind of started trying it myself to see if it fit what I needed, because I'll be honest, not every accommodation that you see on Instagram is going to be like the one for you. So trial and error until I felt like I built like a list of things. And so now I have a list that if I had an employee that didn't have those already in their workplace, I would say it would be great to have, like X, Y, and Z. But yeah, I guess other neurodivergent people have been great at helping me find what accommodations I needed.
It's awesome to hear that you found that sense of community in other folks. And I'm not speaking just for myself here when I say that the autistic neurodivergent communities are some of the best in terms of supporting each other, helping each other out, and figuring out what makes us successful as individuals and also as a group. Again, you've met one person, but a lot of things can be consistent across some folks. We've got time for one more question from Ryan. Have you ever encountered a boss who was one-sided when there was an issue of another coworker? Rochelle, do you want to tackle this one?
I mean, I could probably only talk about before knowing that I was autistic, I guess.
That's fine.
Having, sort of, there's still that difference. I guess, there's been working in, say, recruitment, which is what I'm doing now, and I previously worked in other organizations as well, and there's been probably more issues in that area when it comes to that sales and recruitment environment, where there's those social expectations and whatnot that they have in those areas or industries, and you get quite picked up, or picked, I guess, on for being different quite quickly, because they're all so social and extroverted and expect that from you. And I guess, there's been times where I've been told that I wasn't commercial, or I wasn't making the decisions the commercial way, or I was taking things literally in the sense of, oh yeah, you can be driven by people, you don't always have to be driven by money, and then not really considering the money aspect as much, and then another colleague, for example, feeling like, oh, this is affecting the rest of the team, where I come from a different perspective of, well, if you're people focused, then you can really help grow the business as well. There's so many different perspectives you can take. But for me, I can't help myself. I'm honest, and I just say what I think when I'm in a situation where I'm really caught off guard, and I didn't expect a reaction from another colleague or the manager where I'm the issue, and I just basically just said my point. There's been one instance where it didn't work out very well for me, where I was told, maybe this is not the right place for me. And I made the decision to leave because I felt like, well, yes, this is not the right place for me. This is toxic, and I should be where I'm accepted as a person. But I've also been in a situation more in the community services sector where there was a misunderstanding between myself and another colleague about a client's needs. But the colleague actually made me out to be the one who made the mistakes when I was pretty adamant that I knew exactly what was going on. And that manager appreciated my honesty and directness, and how in you actually said your level of integrity is inspiring, that you stood up for yourself and you're doing the right thing regardless of what your colleague might think of you or anyone might think of you. So yeah, I mean, there's been two sides of that where I've been told, keep your head up high, you've got integrity, stand by what you believe in and do the right thing, by good leaders and good leadership. But there's been times where there's not been such good leadership, I guess, where it didn't work in my favor. But in hindsight, it kind of did in the end, because, I left a toxic workplace that was never going to be good for me, where I had to continuously mask and impress people and just couldn't be my best self anyways. So, but I know not everyone can always leave a workplace. So, but I could obviously. So yeah, it's a hard one to answer when you weren't so sure why you were the way you are, but that's the best I could give, I guess.
I appreciate your transparency and also how you dealt with that, leaving a place that wasn't good for you, and also knowing when it was time to do that. Thank you, and also thank you to the panelists for engaging with the audience and really helping us with that. I'm going to turn it back over to Jillica to close us out. Once again, thank you to all the panelists for their amazing stories and their perspectives.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. It was a great panel to hear from all of your stories. In terms of what we are, now that we're concluding the event, I will say that we have this event every single month. We're going to be having a new webinar on neurodiversifying the workforce of the future. So definitely sign up at mentra.me/events. And you'll see all the events coming up. And then I will also say that we've been working really, really hard to build a technology platform to actually match neurodivergent individuals with meaningful careers. So our website is live. You can go on there today if you are a neurodiverse job seeker. You can sign up. You can, connect with the community. In the long run, we hope this is not just a job platform. We hope this is really a network for the neurodiverse community. And so, we want to build out what you need, and something that can really be meaningful and impactful. So we've realized that the existing hiring systems don't work for this community, and so we've taken all the feedback from everyone we've spoken to, and really built something that embodies that community-driven design. So really excited about what is to come as we neurodiversify the workforce of the future. And thank you so much, Rochelle, Nadia, for coming. Shay, your awesome moderation, and thank you for every single one of you who's attended. To learn more about what we do, visit mentra.me, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, folks. Whatever time it is for you, good morning, good evening, and good night. And we'll see you all soon. Thanks again.